Okay, good evening Year 9. Thank you for joining me in your homework time to prep for our lesson tomorrow, so that you're coming in with a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more understanding. So hopefully we can really speed through and reach those higher thinking skills tomorrow. So today, obviously, we've had a look at the plot through the whoosh activity. We've had a little think about all the different things that happen throughout the entire plot of Macbeth. And moving forward, we are going to be looking more at the language, okay, which is why I've got this here. So in our lesson tomorrow, we are going to be looking at Act 1, Scene 1, start at the very beginning, the very best place to start. Act 1, Scene 1 of Macbeth. And you'll see here, and you'll have noticed from today's lesson, that we start with the witches, and we are going to be considering in our lesson tomorrow why Shakespeare made that structural decision to start with the witches, and what through his language he was trying to tell us, what we could expect throughout the play of Macbeth. As we go on, I do just want to point out this website here, okay? So I've got this up. NFS Macbeth. So NFS stands for No Fear Shakespeare, and No Fear Shakespeare is a website that has all of Shakespeare's plays, and the idea is it's No Fear Shakespeare because it's taken away the intimidation that a lot of people feel when they come to study Macbeth. And we feel that intimidation because the language is different, it's alien, it's not the language that we use today. As you can see, we've got hurly-burly here, we've got this sort of what we would call at A2 English language archaic syntax. When shall we three meet again? We don't speak like that anymore. That's what archaic means. It means old, it means out of date. So we do have, and you're not the only person, we have a lot of people who do find themselves intimidated by having a little look at this language. So this website, No Fear Shakespeare, is a brilliant website. I really think that it will support you. So if at any point you're struggling with what we've just read or what you know we're going on to read, I suggest that in your own time, in your own independent study, you hop onto this website, because what you have here is you have a breakdown. You have the original text on this side, and right next to it is a modern translation, okay? So Shakespeare was writing in the 1500s, which was obviously a long time ago, and so what we've got here is somebody has gone to the bother of telling you what that means in modern day English, what that would look like if we were writing that today. So this is definitely a worthwhile website that you should be accessing in your own time. Okay, but we're going to come on to the language in the lesson tomorrow, so I'm not going to spend too long thinking about that now. What I am just going to look at briefly is just have a little think about the witches and what Shakespeare might have been showing us when he used the witches. So one thing that you'll have noticed from the plot is that at the beginning of the story, Macbeth was a good guy, essentially. He was well honoured on the battlefield, people respected him. He was honourable, he was noble, he already had this title, the Thane of Glamis. He was doing really well for himself, and by the end we see that he's gone through these emotions. He has turned into somebody whose morals have been put aside. He's out for his own selfish determination and his own power hunt, and as a consequence we've seen today that he dies. What I'd like to suggest is that Shakespeare shows us right at the very beginning of the play that actually some of what happens to Macbeth is not entirely, one interpretation might be, it's not all entirely his fault. So he opens with these witches, and if you just have a look here, we've got Macbeth in the middle, we've got the witches around the outside, and you can see that Macbeth is almost being pulled down, his eyes are being covered, the witches' hands are over him, and his sight is being blocked by the witches, and as I say, he almost looks in this image here like he's possibly being pulled down. So we do have to consider, and we will consider in the lesson, that perhaps what's being suggested here is that maybe, just maybe, he's not entirely to blame for what happens to him, and that the witches have something to do with that. So we will be having a little think about that as we go through. So I'll just shift this over here. So that's one image that I just wanted us to think about briefly. Okay, so there we have one image where we are possibly it just allows us to think a little bit about what might be going on in what Shakespeare is writing to us. And obviously these images have not been created by Shakespeare. These images have been created by modern day directors, but it just helps us to, it's Shakespeare's notes, it's Shakespeare's directions, stage directions, and language that he uses that have given these directors these ideas. And you can see in this one here that what we have here is we've got these women, and they are all being dressed. Their costume is entirely black, and you can see that also in the image that I've got over the left here, okay? So it's very similar. They're all in dark colours, okay? And we've done enough of literature now to know that, people don't use black just as a mistake, just as a throwaway thought. They're using these things in order to show us something, to suggest something to us, okay? So these women here, as I say, we've got these costumes of all of these particular women here. We've got that darkness that's being suggested to us. The other thing that we have is the idea that over here, these women are not just wearing black, but they're all wearing hoods. So not only are they dressed in this dark, and if you have a look at that stormy setting, think about the work that we've done on creative writing. If we're going to set somebody in this kind of a scene, we're making a point, and what point is that? We've got sort of the clouds that look particularly stormy in the background. We've got this barren land. We've got this idea that, think about the time of year that we're here, when we've got these twigs, these trees that are dead, and the idea that death is there as well. The idea that these trees don't have any leaves. It all just adds together. It builds together in order to give us a particular type of idea about what a director, based on Shakespeare's comments, might want to suggest about these figures. Over here as well, we can see that we've actually got, I'll just pop these over to the sides and bring this one forward. In addition to, we've got the hoods, we've got the dark clothes, and we've also got this mist, this steam, this general sense and idea that there is something supernatural going on that these witches can conjure, okay? I mean, this mist is, even if they've got something here that they are, if they've got something at the ground there that they're potentially supposed to be cooking or something, this mist has travelled, this mist is floated all the way across the floor here, and it's rising up here, and it's very much indicative of this supernatural element, okay? And the supernatural, for the people that Shakespeare was writing for, was scary. The supernatural was to be feared. The supernatural was very real, and I'd just like to think about that very briefly now, and that is going to be the last thing, okay? And then your 10 minutes of homework this evening is nearing to an end. But I'm just going to show you this here. So this is the front cover of something that King James wrote. Now, James was the king at the time that Shakespeare was writing, and King James very heavily believed in witches. He believed that witches existed. He believed that witches had supernatural powers. He believed that witches were to be feared, and in fact, he passed a law on witch hunting. And he wrote this book, he wrote this entire book to do with witches, and in it, he explains what he thinks about witches, that they were demonic, that they were the creatures. If we just look over here, actually, these are a few lines from the book, so you can see here the fearful abounding at this time in this country of these detestable slaves of the devil, witches or enchanters, have moved me to dispatch in post this following treatise of mine. So that bit's not as important there. So he's just saying that this is why he's writing this book, that such assaults of Satan are most certainly practiced. Now, we've looked at superlatives. We know what superlatives are. When you look at the extremes, the top extremes, the bottom extremes, most is a superlating adjective. They are most certainly practiced. He's talking about witchcraft, and the instrument thereof merit most severely to be punished, okay? So basically, witchcraft is real, most certainly, and anyone who is practicing witchcraft should be punished severely, and he thinks that they are slaves of the devil, okay? This is what King James believed. And Shakespeare was writing at this time that King James is king. And it's not like today where we have, no relationship with our royalty and our writers. Shakespeare would have very much been in contact with King James. King James was a big fan of Shakespeare, and they had a relationship. And Shakespeare would have been writing in order to promote what King James wanted to be promoted. And one of the things King James wanted to be promoted was these ideas in his books, that there are witches are real, witches can do things, and witches need to be hunted and destroyed, okay, because he was scared of them. And so one thing that Shakespeare might have been trying to do, therefore, is suggest these same ideas in his play. And we've had a think about, we will go on in our lesson tomorrow to have a think about the writing and how that shows us. We've had a little think about then how the way the people have depicted them might be suggesting to us. We've had to think about what it might mean for Macbeth, okay? Was Macbeth really to blame? If Macbeth was solely to blame, why would Shakespeare open his play with this scene with the witches in it, okay? And we've had a little think about contextually why that might be, who he was writing for, who was his audience, and what that audience believed, okay? So hopefully when we come to our lesson tomorrow, you will be coming with lots of ideas already on what Shakespeare might have been suggesting when he decided to open his novel with this scene of the witches. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, Year 9. Thank you. Good night.